A Druid was a member of the educated, professional class among the Celtic peoples of Gaul, Britain, Ireland, and possibly elsewhere during the Iron Age. The Druid class included law speakers, poets and doctors, among other learned professions. Although the best known among the Druids were the religious leaders, very little is known about the ancient Druids. They left no written accounts of themselves, and the only evidence are a few descriptions left by Greek, Roman, and various scattered authors and artists, as well as stories created by later medieval Irish writers. While archaeological evidence has been uncovered pertaining to the religious practices of the Iron Age people, not one single artifact or image has been unearthed that can undoubtedly be connected with the ancient Druids. Various recurring themes emerge in a number of the Greco-Roman accounts of the Druids, including that they performed animal and even human sacrifice, believed in a form of reincarnation, and held a high position in Gaulish society. Next to nothing is known for certain about their cultic practice, except for the ritual of oak and mistletoe as described by Pliny the Elder. The earliest known reference to the Druids dates to 200 BCE, although the oldest actual description comes from the Roman military general Julius Caesar in his commentary I de Bello Gallico. Later Greco-Roman writers also describe the Druids, including Cicero, Tacitus and Pliny the Elder. Following the Roman invasion of Gaul, Druidism was suppressed by the Roman government under the 1st century CE emperors Tiberius and Claudius, and it had disappeared from the written record by the 2nd century. In about 750 CE the word Druid appears in a poem by Blad Mac, who wrote about Jesus, saying that he was better than a prophet, more knowledgeable than every Druid, a king who was a bishop and a complete sage. The Druids then also appear in some of the medieval tales from Christianized Ireland, like the Táin Bo, Caolga, where they are largely portrayed as sorcerers who opposed the coming of Christianity. In the wake of the Celtic revival during the 18th and 19th centuries, fraternal and neo-pagan groups were founded based on ideas about the ancient Druids, a movement known as Neo-Druidism. Many popular modern notions about Druids have no connection to the Druids of the Iron Age and are largely based on much later inventions or misconceptions. Etymology. The modern English word Druid derives from the Latin druides, which was considered by ancient Roman writers to come from the native Celtic Gaulish word for these figures. Other Roman texts also employ the form druidi, while the same term was used by Greek ethnographers as delta rho upsilon iota delta eta sigma. Although no extant Romano-Celtic inscription is known to contain the form, the word is cognate with the later insular Celtic words. Old Irish drua, druid, sorcerer, Old Cornish druw, Middle Welsh drea, seer, wren. Based on all available forms, the hypothetical Proto-Celtic word may then be reconstructed as *druides, meaning oak knower. The two elements go back to the Proto-Indo-European roots *dru and *vide, to see. The sense of oak knower is supported by Pliny the Elder, who in his Natural History considered the word to contain the Greek noun dries, oak tree, and the Greek suffix ides. The modern Irish word for oak is dare, which occurs in anglicised place names like Derry, Dwar, and Kildare, Sildara. There are many stories about saints, heroes, and oak trees, and also many local stories and superstitions about trees in general, which still survive in rural Ireland. Both Old Irish drua and Middle Welsh drea could also refer to the wren, possibly connected with an association of that bird with augury in Irish and Welsh tradition, practices and doctrines. According to historian Ronald Hutton, we can know virtually nothing of certainty about the ancient Druids, so that, although they certainly existed, they function more or less as legendary figures. However, the sources provided about them by ancient and medieval writers, coupled with archaeological evidence, can give us an idea of what they might have performed as a part of their religious duties. societal role and training. One of the few things that both the Greco-Roman and the vernacular Irish sources agree on about the Druids is that they played an important part in pagan Celtic society. In his description, Julius Caesar claimed that they were one of the two most important social groups in the region and were responsible for organizing worship and sacrifices, divination, and judicial procedure in Gaulish, British and Irish society. He also claimed that they were exempt from military service and from the payment of taxes, and that they had the power to excommunicate people from religious festivals, making them social outcasts. Two other classical writers, Diodorus Siculus and Strabo, also wrote about the role of Druids in Gallic society, claiming that the Druids were held in such respect that if they intervened between two armies they could stop the battle. Pomponius Mela is the first author who says that the Druids' instruction was secret, and was carried on in caves and forests. Druidic law consisted of a large number of verses learned by heart, and Caesar remarked that it could take up to 20 years to complete the course of study. There is no historic evidence during the period when Druidism was flourishing to suggest that Druids were other than male. What was taught to Druid novices anywhere is conjecture. Of the Druids' oral literature, not one certifiably ancient verse is known to have survived, even in translation. All instruction was communicated orally, but for ordinary purposes. Caesar reports, the Gauls had a written language in which they used Greek characters. In this he probably draws on earlier writers. By the time of Caesar, Gaulish inscriptions had moved from the Greek script to the Latin script. Sacrifice. Greek and Roman writers frequently made reference to the Druids as practitioners of human sacrifice, a trait they themselves reviled, believing it to be barbaric. Such reports of Druidic human sacrifice are found in the works of Lucan, Julius Caesar, Suetonius and Cicero. Caesar claimed that the sacrifice was primarily of criminals, but at times innocents would also be used, and that they would be burned alive in a large wooden effigy, now often known as a wicker man. A differing account came from the 10th century commentator Bernencher, which claimed that sacrifices to the deities Teutates, Esus and Taurinus were by drowning, hanging, and burning, respectively. Diodorus Siculus asserts that a sacrifice acceptable to the Celtic gods had to be attended by a Druid, for they were the intermediaries between the people and the divinities. He remarked upon the importance of prophets in Druidic ritual. These men predict the future by observing the flight and calls of birds and by the sacrifice of holy animals. All orders of society are in their power, and in very important matters they prepare a human victim, plunging a dagger into his chest by observing the way his limbs convulse as he falls and the gushing of his blood. They are able to read the future. There is archaeological evidence from Western Europe that has been widely used to back up the idea that human sacrifice was performed by the Iron Age Celts. Mass graves found in a ritual context dating from this period have been unearthed in Gaul, at both Gournay-sur-Erendy and Ridmont-sur-Ancre in what was the region of the Belgae chiefdom. The excavator of these sites, Jean-Louis Bruno, interpreted them as areas of human sacrifice in devotion to a war god. Although this view was criticized by another archaeologist, Martin Brown, who believed that the corpses might be those of honored warriors buried in the sanctuary rather than sacrifices. Some historians have questioned whether the Greco-Roman writers were accurate in their claims. J. Rives remarked that it was ambiguous whether the Druids ever performed such sacrifices, for the Romans and Greeks were known to project what they saw as barbarian traits onto foreign peoples, including not only Druids but Jews and Christians as well, thereby confirming their own cultural superiority in their own minds. Taking a similar opinion, Ronald Hutton summarized the evidence by stating that the Greek and Roman sources for Druidry are not, as we have received them, of sufficiently good quality to make a clear and final decision on whether human sacrifice was indeed a part of their belief system. Nora Chadwick, an expert in medieval Welsh and Irish literature, who believed the Druids to be great philosophers, has also supported the idea that they had not been involved in human sacrifice, and that such accusations were imperialist Roman propaganda. National Geographic recently revealed evidence that suggests that Druids possibly committed cannibalism and ritual human sacrifice, but Mark Horton, an archaeologist at the University of Bristol associated with these recent findings, states that if cannibalism was practiced it was probably extremely rare. It may be evidence of increasing hunger and desperation as Roman invaders closed in, or even the result of battle atrocities. Guy G. Strimser, as well as Thomas Hartwell Horne, Philosophy. Alexander Cornelius Polyhistor referred to the Druids as philosophers and called their doctrine of the immortality of the soul in reincarnation or metempsychosis Pythagorean. The Pythagorean doctrine prevails among the Gauls, teaching that the souls of men are immortal, and that after a fixed number of years they will enter into another body. Caesar remarks, the principal point of their doctrine is that the soul does not die and that after death it passes from one body into another. Caesar wrote, with regard to their actual course of studies, the main object of all education is, in their opinion, to imbue their scholars with a firm belief in the indestructibility of the human soul, which, according to their belief, merely passes at death from one tenement to another, for by such doctrine alone, they say, which robs death of all its terrors, can the highest form of human courage be developed. Subsidiary to the teachings of this main principle, they hold various lectures and discussions on astronomy, on the extent and geographical distribution of the globe, on the different branches of natural philosophy, and on many problems connected with religion. Julius Caesar, De Bello Gallico, vi. 13 Diodorus Siculus, writing in 36 BCE, described how the Druids followed the Pythagorean doctrine that human souls are immortal and after a prescribed number of years they commence a new life in a new body. In 1928, folklorist Donald A. Mackenzie speculated that Buddhist missionaries had been sent by the Indian king Ashoka. Others have invoked common Indo-European parallels. Caesar noted the Druidic doctrine of the original ancestor of the tribe, whom he referred to as Dispata, or Father Hades.